Can y'all
Well,
hear
welcome
me?
everyone. We are glad that you have joined us once again, and glad that your groups are meeting along. We are at chapters 3 and 4, and it's great to be with the other pastors. And so, guys, I don't know if you've ever had this. I've had this happen. Tim Keller talks about it at the beginning of chapter 3, where we talking about justice and quoting various Old Testament scriptures, and someone will come to us and say, "Well, Pastor, that's all fine. Justice, that's all in the Old Testament, but we don't have to worry about that in the New Testament." How do you respond to that? Keller talks about that in chapter 3. How do you respond to when people push back on that?
But if I turn the Bluetooth off, my earbuds don't work.
Well, I'll take it. I'll take a jab at it first, because that's often, whenever I find that congregants are debating about a scripture, it's usually not because we want to increase the capacity of that scripture. It's because somebody's trying to find a way around it and a way of avoiding it. And so I look at the fact that our congregations are filled. First of all, our congregations are already different in the sense that we've got some liberal and some conservative views. And I know we try not to get political, but we can use political terms when we have people in our congregation that see the scripture more liberal and some that see it more conservative. And so they take that approach. But I think we need to remind ourselves, when we look at the New Testament, when we look at the teachings of Jesus Christ, and when we even look at the writings of Paul reminds us in Romans chapter 15, he lets us know, those of you that are strong, you ought to be bearing the infirmities of the weak. You ought to be out there, finding who your neighbors are and doing good to them and doing good with what you have. And so I think that's the answer to it already, that the New Testament doesn't do away with our quest to take care of the poor and to have this concept of generous justice.
Yeah, I think it speaks loud and clear to it. I mean, in several passages of scripture, who Jesus hung out with, who he spent his time with. Just in the parable, I know we'll discuss that, but the parable of the Good Samaritan, Luke 4:18. I mean, I think he addresses it loud and clearly. Our role as believers. I think the New Testament speaks loud and clear to our role as believers as it relates to justice. And so I think we just point them to scripture and look at Jesus' life and how he associated with those those ostracized and how, just how he spent his life and what he spent his time doing. It was a picture of justice and grace,
Yeah, Pastor Chris, I know you have some thoughts on Jesus and justice.
Can you guys hear me?
We got
yes,
you.
sir.
Okay, because I'm having some real connectivity issue. I'm acting like Pastor Thomas today. But listen, I certainly want to echo what Marion and Eddie have already said clearly. I don't think you can claim to fully understand the ministry of Jesus and not argue, of course, that Jesus concerned himself with justice. As a matter of fact, I'd even go so far as to say that the only time that we see Jesus lose his cool in the New Testament were around issues of justice. Particularly when you look at the example at the temple, when Jesus turned over the table, that was not about necessarily exchanging money. That was about people being done an injustice, a disservice, people being taken advantage of. And so we see a very strong reaction from Jesus in that. And if we are going to identify as Christians, I think we too have to have a strong reaction to injustice.
Absolutely. Well, and Jesus begins his ministry in Luke chapter 4 by quoting from Isaiah 61, that he's come to liberate the poor and to declare the year of Jubilee. Jesus goes after those who are racially different. He had to go through Samaria in order to meet with the Samaritan woman. I mean, over and again, Jesus crosses lines of racial divide. He crosses lines of economic divide. He provides for those who are widows, like the widow of Nain, ensuring that her son who provides for her is raised from the dead to ensure that she's protected. Tells parables of those who are seeking justice, like the importunate widow who demanded justice from the judge, and surely God will give justice to those who ask. I mean, over and again, as you guys have been saying, Jesus repeatedly talks about justice and pitches his own ministry, shapes his own ministry in the light of the Old Testament's talk about justice. And he does that most clearly in the parable of the Good Samaritan. What are your guys' thoughts? Have you guys have preached and taught that passage? I mean, how have you seen the parable of the Good Samaritan relating to issues of justice? Pastor Myron, what do you think?
Oh man, I I think I really love how Tim Keller puts it when he talks about the Great Samaritan. I looking at it from that standpoint to where, hey, we're talking about a good Samaritan, but Jesus is our great Samaritan. But yeah, I think he paints the picture clearly, you know, when he phrases it the way that he does and say the Samaritan is the one that helped, the one that you least expect, where the preacher didn't help, the priest didn't help, you know, the believers and the people that were supposed to help, the worship leader didn't help, the musician didn't help, you know, the mother of the church, she didn't help, but it was the one that you would least expect, the one that probably shouldn't have helped, the one that crossed over racial barriers to help. And I think, you know, I think that really communicates. I see that a lot in what we're dealing with today, you know, as I share with a lot of my brothers, my white brothers and sisters. That's one thing that I shared. I had a very influential individual who asked me the question, what can he do? And he was a big donor of our ministry. I mean, big donor of our ministry. And I told him I appreciate everything that he's done. I appreciate his gifts. I appreciate all of it. And I said, he's been that good Samaritan. He's helped people. I said, but in this season, we need you to be that good Samaritan. We need you to also be that good Samaritan with a voice. We need you to speak to it and speak in your circles of influence. And so not just do the gifts, but also speak to it as well. And so I think we need good Samaritans. We need believers to be believers in this season. That's one of the most profound parables that I see Jesus speaking about justice. And so I love that. And I've been sharing that a lot. But the Good Samaritan, I love it. And I love again how he talks about Jesus being our great Samaritan.
Pastor Chris, thoughts on the Good Samaritan?
Well, absolutely. I certainly echo what Marin said, but I think the part that the believers really need to hear is when we talk about the work of the Good Samaritan or the Great Samaritan, whichever you choose, that in order to address an injustice, he didn't just utilize his faith, he also utilized his finances. So when we start talking about issues of justice and righting wrongs, the church is going to have to do more than just pray and hope the Lord strikes it out. I mean, we're going to have to utilize the real resources that we have available to us in order to put people back in right standing. And I think oftentimes that's where the church misses it. We want to pray, we want to hold hands and sing, but we also have to be prepared, if they say, to put some skin in the game. It's going to take some real resources in order to right some of these systemic wrongs that we see.
Absolutely. And I think, Chris, what I've seen people take action but hadn't said anything. I've seen people say a lot but hadn't taken action. I think we have to take action and we have to speak in this season.
Pastor Eddie, thoughts?
You know, every week we somehow or another find ourselves looking at the front page and making some type of comparison to what we're reading right now. Last week, it was this whole Breonna Taylor and Justice Ginsburg and the difference between that and what was going on in our country. And this week, you know, there was an article that was recently published about, you know, a guy named Mark Cuban and Delonte West. And just to make a long story short, Delonte was an NBA basketball star with millions of dollars, and now he's homeless. And the owner of that team he played for, Mark Cuban, who's on the Shark Tank, reached out and intentionally went out to seek this guy to get him back on his feet. Now, if that's not a picture of generous justice, I don't know what is. That goes back to what Pastor Davis was saying, is that we got to put some finances behind it. This guy's in a hotel room getting ready to go through rehab, and who's going to pay for that? Mark Cuban. So we've got to do what Keller does, and Keller says you've got to have some intentionality about it. You know, the Good Samaritan ran across him. It was just so happened that he was in the right vicinity. But what Keller, I think, is pushing the idea is that the church has to be intentional about reaching out to who our neighbor is. And that's our question we need to be asking ourselves. I hope these groups will do that. I hope these small groups will start asking themselves the question of who is my neighbor? Who is the Samaritan? Or who is my Samaritan? You know, who are the people that I have a difficult time getting along with or interacting with, who society says I shouldn't be in the company of? These are the people, if they're on hard times, and I need to be putting some finances and I need to be putting some action behind what I'm saying if I am going to call myself a Christian and if I'm going to walk in this faith.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sean. No, you go ahead.
I was just going to observe, I mean, just to piggyback on the end of what Eddie was saying there, it's always struck me that, you know, the parable opens with the lawyer asking the question, you know, what are the great commandments? Jesus answers, you know, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbor as yourself. The lawyer says, I've already got the first one. Who's my neighbor, right? Jesus tells him the parable, but the implication is if you don't love those with intentionality who come across your path, it actually raises questions about whether you love God.
Yep, that is.
So, I mean, to what Dr. Jones was saying there, I mean, if we're not pursuing justice with intentionality, with skin in the game, with intentional practice, actually in concrete ways, it really raises questions about, are we actually right with God?
I think too, gentlemen, if I could just chime in, is I think there are a couple of characters on the periphery in that story that bear mentioning at this point. And typically we always debate as to whether or not we're the Levite, the priest, or the Good Samaritan. That they may be the robbers. They may be the robbers. But the good thing about it is the man who was robbed did not die. So the robbers have an opportunity. I've always said the opportunity remains in order to make it right. So if there's some folks in the group who identify with the robber, the good news is the man didn't die. So you still have an opportunity to make it right.
Yeah, that's a good word. Pastor Myron, you take the last word.
Yeah, I think when he says if we are never obligated to relieve others' burdens, but only when we can do it without burdening ourselves, then how do we bear our neighbor's burdens when we bear no burden at all? You know, and I think, again, it goes to what we're saying about putting skin in the game. And, you know, we don't want to be uncomfortable. And that's not my issue. That's not my problem. But we have to bear the burdens of those that are hurting by putting skin in the game and not leaving it to any other organization or any other entity. Those that are hurting and those that are ostracized and those that are marginalized should not have to go to any secular organization to get justice, but they should always be able to come to the church, and we are the church.
That's a great word. I hope you folks, as you all work your way through chapters 3 and 4, you'll find both this conversation encouraging, but also your own conversations. Be intentional as you seek to get to know each other, to think about ways you can be intentional in seeking justice in our city. Godspeed and God bless you.